Chris Lee and Blayne Gilmer 14 here to preview LSU's trip to Oxford. The Tigers coming off a win this weekend, in which the offense looked pretty good. The Rebels, on the other hand, coming off a loss in Tuscaloosa, in which the offense did not look very good. You can catch this game on ESPN Saturday night at 6:30 Central. Very interested to see how Ole Miss in particular rebounds, playing at home, coming from one huge game to another. We'll see what there was an emotional letdown. Certainly, it's going to face another very talented team, but this time it's at home instead of on the road, and that can make a big difference in the SEC.
No doubt, no doubt. And you have a good ball club, especially offensively coming in LSU. I do think they have questions, Chris, when it comes to the defensive side of the ball, for sure. For sure they do. So we'll see how that works out for them. But I'm excited to see this matchup. I still believe in Jaxson Dart, even though he had a rough game against Alabama. I mean, had a pick, no touchdowns, but Jayden Daniels, of course, has been great all year. Even in that Florida State game, he didn't get a whole lot of help in that game. So I'm excited to see the quarterback matchup. I think it's two good coaches in Kiffin and Kelly, and you know that Oxford is going to be rocking and rolling, ready to go. They still have a lot to play for, Chris. This is like a must-win for the Rebels if they want their SEC West hopes to continue. So I expect them to play like that, like their backs are against the wall.
Well, they'll have to start by stopping an LSU offense has just been fantastic. 42.8 points a game. Ole Miss giving up 18.5. LSU is running it 48% of the time, getting 6.1 yards per running play when it does. Some of that is Jayden Daniels, of course. Some of that is the transfer running back they found from Notre Dame, who's really stepped up big, and Logan Diggs. Passing, 8.9 yards per passing play for LSU. That's one of the better numbers in the league, as is LSU's turnover rate, 1.1%. Ole Miss forcing turnovers on 2% of snaps, 3.8 on running plays, 5.5 on passing plays. Rebel defense statistically has been pretty good. I think that's varied, though, against better offenses. And I think Neighbors and Thomas have just looked so good. They're such phenomenal threats downfield. You got to worry about the running game. I just think Ole Miss is going to have trouble getting stops here.
Yeah, now I will say you got to give Ole Miss's defense a good amount of credit. They really stymied Alabama in that first half, and also held up in the red zone very well a couple of times. Actually forced Alabama to go the opposite direction a few times. They couldn't get off the field enough on third down. Alabama was 6 of 13, so that Mississippi defense, has played a lot better, I think it's fair to say, Chris, than it has in years past under Lane Kiffin. This will be a true test for them. But again, like you mentioned with LSU, the biggest question for me coming into this year was, could they find consistent run production outside of the legs of Jayden Daniels? And Logan Diggs has provided that. He has been a consistent guy, someone that can take that burden and just allow Jayden Daniels sometimes to just turn and say, "Here you go, buddy, you take it," because I need to have a play where I'm not touching the ball and doing everything for this team, because he really does taking care of the football. We continue to see the maturity of Jayden Daniels, makes good decisions, and my goodness, has Brian Thomas not turned into a just unbelievable down the field threat? We knew that he was a big, receiver with a good catch radius, but he's turned into a lethal weapon when it comes to pushing the ball down the field. And we know what Malik Neighbors is over there. So I think it's going to be a big test for Pete Golden and that Ole Miss defense, bouncing back with those receivers over there at LSU coming to town. But I really do think if Ole Miss plays up to the standard of what I think they are, Chris, defensively, that they can hold their own with an LSU team that is very, very good. But Ole Miss, I think at times just didn't get off the field enough, and their defense got a little worn down in that second half against Alabama.
Well, I feel like I just completely dismissed Ole Miss on defense here in this side of the matchup. But the Rebels do have 14 sacks. I remember a couple of years ago with Sam Williams, they got after the passer a good bit. Of course, different defensive coordinator in Pete Golding, but I think 14 sacks places Ole Miss in the top 3 or 4 of the league in sacks. LSU's given up 9 this year. It gave up, 40-something a year ago. That's been an issue at times. Look, if this is a close game, a turnover or two as forced by sack can be your difference. So that's one thing to watch here.
Well, also too, when I was watching the Alabama and Ole Miss game, they put the chyron on the screen, of the starting lineup on defense, Chris. And one thing I noticed, I was sitting beside my dad. I said, "Look how many seniors Ole Miss has on defense." Yeah. It was senior. 10 of the 11 starters were seniors, and then you got Centarian Perkins who comes in, and what an athlete he is. He was all over the field. So I just wouldn't throw the keep shoveling dirt on Ole Miss right now if we're anybody across the board on either side of the ball, because I think it's still a very good team. They went up against another very good team who Lane Kiffin called the gold standard of college football, Alabama in Bryant-Denny Stadium, and now they get to have their own home environment. And if there's anything we have learned so far, is going to someone else's environment in the SEC, at least early on, in these conference matchups, is tough for the opponent to get out. So we'll see what kind of atmosphere that is for the Rebels in Oxford, but that is a loaded offense coming to town.
Well, Ole Miss has battled injuries at receiver and at tight end all year to some really key guys, but that had not slowed down Lane Kiffin's offense. Jaxson Dart was phenomenal, and then they hit a brick wall against Alabama. Even after that game, Ole Miss averaging 42 points a game, LSU giving up 25. I'd say that's disappointing given the talent there. Ole Miss is running the ball 48% of the time, getting 5.1 yards per rushing play, even though Quinshon Judkins still has not shown up the way that he did a year ago, and we're now 4 games in. LSU not great against the run, giving up 5.2 yards per rushing play and struggling even against bad rushing attacks. Of course, Dart can carry the ball a lot there. They've got Ulysses Bentley, who's a solid running back who has had a lot of carries at the Division I level. Passing game, Ole Miss's numbers took a hit last game against Alabama, but Rebels still averaging 9.3 yards per pass play. LSU giving up 6.5, and frankly, at times, their pass defense has just left guys wide open against Florida State. We saw it again against Arkansas. I feel like that number there of 6.5 is a little bit deceiving. How do you see this matchup of Ole Miss's offense and LSU's defense, Blayne?
Yeah, when you're talking about this LSU defense, it has been a just comedy of errors at certain times on the back end in terms of busted coverages, busted zone coverages. I mean, when you're in zone coverage and you get lost, Chris, that's just a lack of discipline. I mean, I don't know what's going on there. And that's surprising to me out of a Brian Kelly coach team. You would think the discipline would be the calling card, but defensively, it is not there. They're not a very good assignment team. And as you mentioned, Arkansas, who struggled to run the ball most of the year, found a little bit of success. Got Rashad Dubinion going for 78 yards against him, KJ Jefferson with the quarterback run. So that Ole Miss has that capability. Jaxson Dart didn't really get going, and neither did Quinshon Judkins against Alabama, but we'll see if they're able to do so. You mentioned one thing that's Ole Miss 48% of the time. When Lane Kiffin is rolling, it's much higher than that. I mean, because he wants to run the football, and people misconstrue that a lot. But that was their Achilles heel against Alabama. They couldn't get going in the run game and had to put Dart in too many obvious passing situations. And here comes that Alabama pass rusher. That was the problem in that game. Obviously, LSU has just as elite of a defensive front and is absolutely getting after the quarterback with guys like Mason Smith, Deshaun Womack, of course, Savion Jones. You got Harold Perkins that is all over the place. So it is incumbent that Ole Miss be able to run the football effectively early on in this game to slow down that LSU defensive front. But I think there are going to be opportunities. You mentioned tight ends and things like that. Luke Haas for Arkansas had a huge night. And Priestcorn is a talented pass catcher that's just now getting healthy. He's coming back. And then, you got Michael Trigg. So I think that there's an opportunity there for those guys to really, really have a nice day against LSU.
Special teams, LSU ranked 93rd in the country, much better than it was a year ago, but still mediocre. Ole Miss ranks 55. Those rankings according to SP Plus. Penalties, LSU only averaging 38 yards a game. I think that's the best in the league, or very close to it. I think Florida might be a notch lower. Ole Miss giving up 56 yards of penalty yards a game. That's close to average. So LSU may be a little bit more disciplined, which you're going to need on the road. Finally, let's look at what Vegas and the computers say. Vegas has LSU as a 2.5-point favorite. FPI has these teams dead even, basically. And with the 3-point home field advantage, Ole Miss would be a 3-point favorite. Same thing with SP Plus, almost dead even. That makes Ole Miss a 3-point favorite. Jeff Sagarin's got Ole Miss 3 points better on a neutral field. So add in home field advantage at 6, average that out. So you got 3 computers that like Ole Miss in this with home field advantage, and the odds makers like LSU. That averages out to Ole Miss as a 2-point favorite between those. My gut has been LSU all along, just because I trust Brian Kelly to win this kind of game. But it's kind of amazing to me how some of these computers are not as high on LSU as you would think. And I think a lot of that has to do with some of the stuff that we brought out in the stats earlier, with the defense being mediocre at times, special teams maybe not being great. I think I'm going to go LSU on the road here, but I'm a little nervous about it.
Yeah, me too. I was about to ask you, do you think that the confidence in those computers towards Ole Miss is predicated upon the secondary of LSU being so spotty? I mean, yeah. I wouldn't know. I don't have that kind of analytical brain about me, but I do think what I see is a quarterback in Jayden Daniels and a offense with so many weapons that I think is going to be hard to fully stop. I would put my confidence in this pick very low, because I could see an Ole Miss team coming out, like I said, and with their backs against the wall and playing inspired football at home. I'm going to pick LSU in a tight one, but like I said, I'm not tremendously confident in it. I think Ole Miss could end up playing a very good game. And this, to your point, LSU has not been as dominant against the run as they have in the past. I think Quinshon Judkins could end up having his best game this game, but I'm going to give Jayden Daniels and that wide receiving core the benefit of the doubt and say they win a tight one.
Yeah, it's just very interesting to see the computers and the odds makers so far apart on this one, with 2 fairly high-profile teams. By the way, if you take the over-under of 63 and the spread of 2.5, that makes for a predicted final of 33-30 in LSU's favor. I think when I was just making my final decision, I think you could see some points here for sure. I think when I come down to it and I'm making my pick, there's just that little voice inside of me that says, I trust Brian Kelly more in this kind of game than I do Lane Kiffin. One of the knocks on Lane Kiffin is they beat up on the teams that they should beat up on. But when you face the powerhouses of this league and the top 10 type teams, he's not won many of those since he's been at Ole Miss. They're at home. That makes me a little nervous, but that is the reason that I'm picking LSU in this one.
Yeah, no doubt. And here's the thing: we're going to learn one of 2 things about Lane Kiffin and Ole Miss. Either they have a coaching staff and they have a mature team that is able to make adjustments, and they use that lesson from the lessons they learned from Alabama and come out and play inspired football, or they fit right into that narrative that everybody's saying that you just mentioned, that, hey, either they got it or they don't. And maybe they don't have enough in the tank to take on some of these top tier teams. So we'll just see which one plays out on Saturday, Chris.
We are previewing every single game involving SEC and FBS teams this football season. Best way to get that, hit that subscribe button. We do a daily show from 11 to noon Central and just have tons of football, baseball, basketball content. So I hope you will subscribe and get all that. For Blayne Gilmer, I'm Chris Lee. We're Southeastern 14. We'll see you again soon with more SEC football content.